Hi, everyone. We have Justin McRoberts here today. Justin is an author, coach, speaker, and songwriter. He's the author of 6 books, including Sacred Strides. For over 20 years, Justin has helped artists, ministers, and entrepreneurs find their way. From the stage, through his stories and books, or during coaching sessions, he leans on his years of work and expertise as a minister and artist to help individuals and teams solve problems in their creative processes. When he's not writing, speaking, or coaching, you can find him as the host of the At Sea podcast. He lives in East San Francisco Bay Area. So welcome, Justin. It's really great to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So I just finished reading your book, Title Pending. And
Cool.
yes, yeah, it's wonderful. And
Thank
one
you.
of the things that I love about it is that you remind us that as humans, being creative is just part of who we are, and it's something that we need to do. And so as our audience, as you're working on your books, it is a creative project that you're doing. It's and that's there's an art. It's art. Um,
Yes.
yeah. And I was wondering, Justin, if you would like to say anything about that.
Oh, sure. I mean,
Hmm.
it's so important to keep coming back to that root
Hmm.
um, because for all kinds of reasons. But one of the reasons, specifically insofar as we're talking about putting books together,
Hmm.
uh, a book as an idea, as an artifact, has a kind of gravity to it that is at the same time really can be really helpful. It can also be really distracting.
Mm.
So, um, do so the making of a book, the thing that's in you that you want to pass along to other people, that's the expression part of the root of the thing is who you are. In other words, it's not about the book.
Hmm.
It can't be about the book. If you make it about the book, you get lost. And it's not even, and it's not, and when I say it's not about the book, even the thing you're trying to communicate, there are ways in which like what you want to communicate you could probably do more deeply, more personally. There is, but because there's a cultural weight to a book, like we want to make books so that people will ingest our ideas. So um creativity as an act of just basic human expression, as best we can, to always come back to this. I want to do this because it's in me and because it's an expression of who I am in my fullness. That's why I want to make the thing. I want to make it a book because that's a dominant way people will receive what I have in me. In other words, like make those two different movements. The
Hmm.
one movement is I have things in me that I want to communicate because they're outpourings of who I am.
Hmm.
That's one. The second, maybe even tertiary movement is I want to do it in a particular way so that people will receive it in a different way. If I
Right.
can keep those things separate, I keep myself from getting lost in the machinery of the thing, in the particulars of the thing, and I can actually live in my own soul as an artist. I think that's really, really important.
Hmm. Yes. So you're doing the book project for yourself, for something in you, and also as a way to connect with people.
Well, no, I mean, like,
Hmm.
so I'm doing it because it's in me.
Hmm.
I'm making it public as an
Hmm.
act of love. And those are two separate movements. So the one movement is like the stuff that's in me that
Hmm.
I want to see out. I want to see it. That's actually why, and we forget this.
Hmm.
It's why we make art. It's why we make things. We'll talk about art here in a second. It's why we create at the root of things for ourselves individually. Why do I
Hmm.
create? I don't primarily create because I want to make something for someone else. That's actually not true. I
Hmm.
actually primarily create because it's in me to do it. I want to see my own guts. That's
Hmm.
why I actually create.
Hmm.
The second part is where Seth Godin would suggest this is when it becomes art. So if I'm making stuff, I'm journaling, like I've got my journal over there. I have a file here with some poems and some reflections that haven't seen the public light of day, and they might not.
Hmm.
All this work I've got around me, most of the work I do, that outpourings of who I am, they're not primarily for other people. They're so that I can see myself. They're so
Mm,
that I can know myself. They're so that I can navigate my own internal and external world. That's why I actually create at my root.
mm-hmm,
Making art, on the other hand, like that's the point at which something I've seen in me, I think might be helpful for someone else. And at
mm-hmm.
that point, I start identifying ways to actually make it available to other people. So again,
Oh,
I think it's super important to draw a line between to understand the line between those two things,
yeah.
because if I get tangled up in the effectiveness of what I create, now I'm looking at you, and this is not all pop art, but this is part of
Mm-hmm,
what happens with pop art. It gets cheap when we're thinking about our effectiveness primarily. You should think about
mm-hmm,
your effectiveness as a
mm-hmm.
secondary or tertiary movement. That's one of my harder pushes when it comes to the making of things and the difference between just creativity and
I
art.
see. Yeah, that
Creativity
makes
is
a lot of
pouring to my
sense.
soul. Art
Uh-huh.
is the connection I have between myself and other people in light of the things that I create. But those are two separate things.
That makes a lot of sense because if you have something that you want to share with other people, you know, you have to get it out of you so that you can look at it and
Yep.
see what you have to share.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's profound.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. I had thought of it that way before. Um,
I've got a job. It's because I
yeah.
I try to reframe things for people and they go, hey, that actually makes sense. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Very cool. Yeah. And then you mentioned that you were going to talk a little bit about what art actually is.
Yeah, so I really like Seth Godin's definition of art, that art is
Mhm.
anything we create that forges a connection between people.
Mm,
It is the connection part that actually makes a thing art. So if I, like, again, I'm looking at my journal, is that art? Well, I mean, if I suggest that, and I'm okay with this, if I suggest that I'm one of the persons with whom I'm forging a connection when I write in my journal,
mhm,
then I can talk about it as art. I think that gets confusing. When I talk about art and connecting with other people, I really mean like people who aren't me. So
mhm,
if what I create, whether that's a meal, it is like the primary human form of art is the making of meals.
yeah.
Whether it's a meal or it's a song or it's a podcast or it's a poem or it's a book, um, the fact that I put something in the world and it forges a connection between me and someone else or between them and someone else.
Mhm,
Once I put something in the world and it helps to forge connections with people, now we're talking about art. Insofar as it's something that I'm doing that like isn't going to see the light of day or I don't know, not that that's not an art form we can talk about in
mhm,
those terms, but really like that's my creativity.
mhm,
Art is about connection between myself and other people. And this is
mhm,
part of why I like this definition is because um the pureness, the pureness, I think that's the word I want to use.
mhm,
Uh the pureness or the pure nature of me sitting down in my own room, tinkering around on my guitar, or me playing around with these poems that I've been messing around with for like 6 or 7 years, and like the joy and the pure, like we really do value that. There's something so deeply valuable about like that practice. And a lot of us really struggle with the way that gets corrupted when we're talking about sales and marketing and shipping and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Art includes and is in fact defined by things like shipping and marketing and
Mhm,
sales. So knowing that going in allows me to enter into art as art. And it helps me to reframe those things like sales and marketing and shipping, because this thing I've done over here that's personal to me has its own value. This has its own value. This
mhm,
over here has a completely different set of values. And if the set and this set of values over here, we're talking about art, the value is connection between myself and other people.
mhm,
So then marketing isn't a matter of like taking this pure thing and then distorting it. Marketing is a matter of how do I dig into the value system of art, which has to do with connection. So how do I get this into the lives of people that will benefit from it? That's the marketing question. So the
mhm.
definition of art that I get from Seth Godin frees me from this false equivalency between the stuff I create from my soul because I need it and the desire I have to connect with other people through it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Wow. Yeah. And another thing I've been thinking about is a lot of our audience have a message that they want to put into a book, and they might not be thinking of like putting a message out there as art. Um, but it really can be, and it actually needs to be. Would you agree?
It can, I think it can be. I think it doesn't have to be. I think
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it's art, it has to do whether or not. So what the conversation we're having now is between is the difference between propaganda and art.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, and propaganda isn't necessarily bad so long as you know that that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So to mask propaganda with like in the veil of like this is just a creative expression, yeah, don't do that to yourself, and don't do that to your audience.
Right.
Like be clear, be clear that you have a message you want to get across, and know that that's what you're doing. And if you
Mm-hmm.
want to do that, if you want to do that creatively, if you want to be yeah, if you want to be creative and what's the word I'm looking for, entrepreneurial and experimental about how you communicate your message,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's great, and be creative about that. But and here's where again the definition of art is so important to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really about human connection. That's about trying to get people to know or believe or be acquainted with or trust an idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's not about human connection. I have an idea that I think is important. I want you to have and share that same idea. So I'm going to use these vehicles to try to convince you of the importance of the accuracy of the effect and the effectiveness of this idea. That's
Mm-hmm.
not really about human connection. That's propaganda. And it's not bad, because there's certainly some ideas at times where we're like, I think as an idea, I think that children shouldn't have to go without eating. That's
Mm-hmm.
an idea. And if I make work, if I creatively form like a series of emails or write a book about poverty among children in the rural United States, I'm making propaganda, and I can do that creatively, and I think that's a positive.
Yes.
But that's about the idea. Does that make some sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, so propaganda is not bad, and we can do it artistically and creatively, but it is different than making art.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Art is purely about the connection, and it is about, and I'm not trying to convince you of something in art. If you are convinced by something or moved by something, that's that's on you, and that's something that happens in you, but that's not what I was trying to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking in particular of like the Grapes of Wrath. I don't know why that popped into my head. But
Oh, good.
you can, yeah. I mean, that's art. You can read it and be completely moved by it. And it could
Yes,
change your politics or not. Um,
but the effectiveness, there you go. It's like the
yeah.
target
Hmm.
for the writing and the publication of the book wasn't that we're going to try to rearrange the political perspectives of our readers to
Hmm.
understand what like the vital nature of agrarian culture, so that they would vote differently.
Hmm.
Like that, like if that happens, cool, but that's
Hmm.
not what was written, and it's not why it was published. It was written and published because it was beautiful, and it was going to forge just raw, deep human connection.
Yes.
Versus there are definitely other tracts and other
Hmm.
other volumes that are written uh like I'm thinking of oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on the title of the book. Recently, someone I respect put out a book about climate change, and it is about changing people's minds. This is what I
Hmm.
want. The book is, this is what I want you to know, and this is how I want you to behave. This is how I
Hmm.
want you to behave differently in light of this information.
Yeah.
Again, the word is negative culturally, but it shouldn't be. That's propaganda. That's
Right.
me trying to tell you this is an idea that I think is important, and I think you should believe my perspective,
Hmm.
and I want to change your life and the way you live in light of it.
Hmm.
Uh, that's different than the Grapes of Wrath.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I think that the Grapes of Wrath has, by opening people's hearts and connecting people, probably has changed people's politics, but that wasn't why it was written.
Yes,
Yeah.
the metric was different. Did you
Yeah.
enjoy it? Did you feel more connected to your world as the metric versus did we get you to do a specific thing on the other
Right.
side of engagement with this piece? That's a
Yeah.
very different metric. It's a fine metric. Just know that that's what you're doing when you're doing it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Um, yeah. And also in your book, Title Pending, um, I like how you talk about how difficult it can be to actually finish the piece, and how to know like when to call it done, and what it's like when you're coming up against deadlines, whether they're self-imposed or
Yeah.
yeah.
So there I go again with the line between raw creativity and art.
Hmm.
So with art, once I've decided I want to do something, I want to take something that's true of me or real for me, or something that I love, or feels good for me, and I want to make this available for other people.
Hmm.
I I am now making this about other people,
Hmm.
which is to say, I can't be. And this is such a strange thing to say. I cannot be in that process. Like, oh, no, I should say, my connection with the work, my connection with the work can no longer be the metric by which the schedule is decided. So if it's just pure creativity, I can work on something for 10 years.
Hmm.
And to hell with everyone else, I'm working on this and it's fun for me.
Yeah.
That's great. As soon as I'm making art, then I'm making it about other people, and me setting a deadline and saying, okay, so like here's an example. Um, I'm I'm towards the tail end of a project with a friend of mine that's about spiritual practices in the context of mental health,
Hmm.
specifically depression. I've been writing poems and reflections about depression and ADHD and spiritual practice for, I don't know, 15 years off and on, just kind of been there. And it's stuff that I need because I'm someone who's lived with ADHD and depression off and on for ADHD and depression, I would say off and on, ADHD and in light of my ADHD depression for most of my life. So that's work I've been doing for me. He and I talked earlier this year, and he's been in the same boat. And we said, dude, it's time. Let's make this book. So now we have a deadline.
Hmm.
And the deadline is October. I'm looking at my calendar right now. I have some work to do. The deadline is actually, we need to have a finished product, a finished book, to Baker Books in October.
Hmm.
Could I keep working on these pieces as this therapeutic outpouring of my own experience of life? Yes. But I have now decided I'm going to put this thing out in the world, and Baker Books has said we need this thing by October. So that forces a couple of things. One, I forces a couple of things. It forces this kind of decision about work that I wouldn't make otherwise, and the decision is whether or not it's finished.
Hmm.
A pure-hearted artist will never feel truly done
Right.
with the work she's making ever. Which is to say that all done, like every time we say it's done, every time we say it's finished, that is always artifice. Every single time, it's artificial. It is mechanical. It's
Hmm.
cold-hearted. It's cold-blooded. It's utilitarian. It's all the things we don't like about our creative processes.
Hmm.
Deadlines and saying what is organic for us is to never be finished because
Yeah.
we are constantly creating. That's what's actually organic.
Hmm.
So deadlines are always inorganic, they're always artificial, and they always feel a little bit gross.
Hmm.
What they do though is they force the work out of our hands so
Yeah.
that we can then, because it's our thing, it's our precious little thing. And if the world around us wants it, they're like, can we have the baby? And we're like, no, you can't have the baby. And what deadlines say is like, you said to us that you were going to give us the baby.
Yeah.
So on October 14th, we're going to need to see that baby in our hands. and it forces that sense of doneness that I would not naturally come to. It's one of the things that, again, earlier in our art making, we in our creativity, like we sort of maybe expect at times that I'm going to feel finished with a piece.
Mm-hmm.
But if you mean what you say, and if you mean what you're doing, you're never going to feel finished, ever. You'll never feel finished. So you have to force that deadline. You have to force that doneness. It has to be on your calendar. And just like your workplace, that if you don't show up at your workplace when you said you were, you're going to lose your job. That's how we have to treat these things that we now call art. We put it on the calendar. It feels artificial because it is. And we obey it anyways because it's no longer about us.
Right. Yeah. All right. And do you have any final words of encouragement for our authors today?
Absolutely. Process publicly. So when, like, in the making, specifically in this season of life, in the making of actual art, I'll say it like this. It's July, today is July 24th, 2023. And the next decade or more, specifically in American culture, is going to be marked by a deep dive into loneliness, unlike we've seen in our particular lifetimes. Like, our next massive challenge culturally is going to be isolation and loneliness. It won't be the artifact you create that helps people in the next season of life. And it doesn't matter even if you're writing books on depression or writing books on loneliness or writing books on isolation. What will matter is that you are present in your work and you are present as you make your work. So as you are making art, process your stuff publicly. Talk about the difficulties of it. Talk about your victories. Share both things. Share as much of yourself in your process as you wish there was in your product. Because the thing you offer as an artist is your soul. That's what you actually offer. And what we're going to need culturally, institutionally, nationwide over the next decade plus is we're going to need more personal human presence. And the actual promise of art has always been about human connection. It's always an answer to the question, am I alone in my life and in my experience of life? Art is how we've been answering that question since the dawn of man. And the answer is no, you're not alone, because look at me. So all the mechanisms that we have surrounding us that would push us into isolation so that we would become machines that generate these little artifacts, push past that stuff. Process your work, process your struggles, share your victories along the way so that you can be present as an artist. That will make your work worth doing, and it will actually fulfill the promise that art made years and years ago.
Wow. Wise words. Thank you. Yeah. And Justin, do you have a gift that you're offering the audience today?
Do you want to, what did we decide on? Remind, what did we decide? We're doing a book? We're doing
Yeah.
we're doing,
could we actually do title pending?
Yes, like, absolutely. We're gonna do, and you just remind me how I have that written down here that we're offering title pending.
Okay.
And we're gonna upload that somewhere and they can pull it down. How are we doing that?
Yeah, if you could send me a link and they can follow the link and download it.
100%.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
it's one of my favorite books that I've done. It was the second book that I had written. I'd done like 18 musical projects and had done a big old book project after that. And I thought, gosh, I want to do that thing. I want to process publicly what it looks like for me to be making art. So the book is title pending, things I think about when I make stuff. And I would love to offer that to your folks.
Great. And I would love for everyone to read it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for
my pleasure,
sharing your wisdom and encouragement. It's been really great to have you.
Happy to. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks. Bye.